Welcome to the Odd Ones Out podcast. If you ever feel like you're on the outside looking in, you are not alone. Let's challenge our limiting beliefs and embrace who we truly are. Hello and welcome to the Odd Ones Out podcast. I'm Becky, this is Maz.
Hello.
And we are here with you today to go through the things that ultimately hold us back. That's it in a nutshell, because we are all for self-enrichment, being the best of ourselves. And if you've listened to previous podcasts, you'll know that we've explored our root convictions, the things that are really baseline foundations for driving behaviours that we wish we just didn't have. If you have been listening to our episodes already, thank you so much for coming back and listening to this one. In the last episode, we explored one of my behaviours driven by my root conviction of not feeling good enough, and that was on food addiction. And it's now Maz's turn to be under the microscope. We discussed your root convictions a couple of episodes ago, which were not belonging and not feeling safe. Yeah. And so this one, the first behaviour that you're up for chatting about, we've talked about this being holding back, haven't we? What do you mean by holding back? How would you define that as a behaviour that is driven by those two root convictions?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of this episode, you were talking about how we were held back by our root convictions. But I think for this particular episode, I want to talk a bit about how I personally hold back in general. I suppose it mainly, if I had to kind of encapsulate it, it's just that I'm not entirely myself. I feel sort of a fairly strong connection with who I am internally, but when it comes to showing it to other people, it's probably sort of a half-powered version of who I really am. And that is almost entirely habitual. And it has its sort of genesis in childhood, as a lot of these things do. But I've found that holding back incredibly difficult to stop, really, because it's become such a natural part of my sort of interactions with other people.
Wouldn't that? Because I'm sure, because there are times, fair enough, I'm an introvert, but I'm a socially confident introvert. I think it's the easiest way I can explain it. But even feeling okay in social settings, I will hold back if I'm having a bit of an off day, and I won't necessarily give my all, and especially if there are people that I don't actually know, because there's that level of protection, that vulnerability that I don't want to expose. Now, this is who I am, don't want to be judged.
Yeah.
But for you, when you talk about holding back and not being yourself, would you say it's all the time, and would you say that it's actually debilitating rather than just a choice?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I sometimes will find myself doing it. I mean, it doesn't always happen in social situations. It can even be just me on my own. So it's not sort of limited to that. But I will find, for the most part, that it just happens unconsciously, and occasionally, while it's going on, I might realise I'm doing it, but I kind of almost feel powerless to stop it or to change course while it's happening. And yes, it's debilitating to the extent that, I mean, you're right, most people hold back a little bit. I don't think it necessarily derails them, or if they have a sort of an inner commentary going along with it, it's not necessarily one that's particularly sort of self-punitive or kind of really, really harsh, whereas mine tends to be. If I realise that I'm holding back and I'm not being myself, I can be really hard on myself, and that is sort of an ongoing thing while everything else sort of unfolds around me. So, and I think my holding back takes a lot of different forms as well. It's not necessarily just in the way that I might communicate, in the way I say things. It's also the roles I have in life. It's what I consider to be appropriate for the person I think I am, or historically what was set as
expected of you.
Expected of me, yeah. And I sort of stuck quite diligently to that when I was younger, just because I assumed that was the way I had to be.
So you moulded a personality which made you hold back who you really were?
It wasn't a personality. It was a sort of that kind of facade, public face thing, because I really a lot of it does come back to being a kid and being surrounded by not just introverts, but people who are particularly, I suppose, not very good at showing their emotions. And I was very, very sensitive, and I could tell that they were holding back themselves. So I often saw, I think probably my mother in particular, but even my father, saying things. I could tell that they weren't really injecting their true personalities into it. They were catering a lot for the needs of other people, and not necessarily putting themselves forward that much. And that was probably for them a coping mechanism that they were for the most part comfortable with, but I never was. I always felt a bit of an odd one out anyway, because I was quite eccentric would be too strong a word. I suppose as a kid I was a bit more random, a bit more, I mean, I was often called absent-minded. I had a bit more kind of energy about me. My head was all over the place. A bit more kind of chaotic, I think. Whereas the rest of my family were a bit more measured, a bit more, they always seemed to know what was happening, how they should respond.
And that's how they presented themselves.
Yeah, exactly. But I think for the most part, that was their kind of core personality as well.
Okay.
I mean, they may have been molded to behave like that too. But I think having spoken to them, even in recent years, I get a sense that they were that they were okay with it for the most part, whereas I never was. So I think I tried to follow suit in order to fit in, because that's all I knew. I didn't have any other role models who were hot on their sleeve and saying exactly what they wanted and not really caring so much about the consequences.
So you've got this two thing, one where you're holding back and you don't like it.
Yeah.
So you've got this running commentary that's negative, which is exacerbating everything because you're pulling yourself apart because you're holding back.
Yep.
But also, if you've got this long-term, hopefully short-term result, but long-term goal of being yourself, if you're holding back, how do you ever get a chance to explore it? And if you're never fully yourself and you've got that disconnect, then that can also make you feel negative in different ways. And does it exacerbate kind of anxiety or low mood? Because I'll say again, when we talk about holding back, it sounds very innocuous, like quite simple. Like, I just hold back every so often. But this actually is a proper undercurrent behaviour, which is driving negativity on some level on a daily basis, would you say? Because you said it happens even when it's not in social environments. Like, even on your own, you will question yourself and hold yourself back from doing what you think is right for you.
Well, because it's very easy when you're that good at playing a certain role, it's very easy to forget who you actually are underneath it all. And I'm somebody who's definitely prone to a lot of self-analysis. So it's not like I'm completely out of touch with who I actually am, but there are parts of me that I've really neglected, to be perfectly honest, and haven't exercised for years and years and years. And when that happens, and those sides of you kind of wither a little bit, you almost go along with sort of the consensus or the parts that you do show. So being a kid and having to cope with sort of quite a lot in both living in Iraq and moving over here, I just clicked into that. I've got to cope. I've got to just put one foot in front of the other. And the best way to do that is to do what everyone else seems to be doing, which is to be very stoic, very kind of pragmatic, and achieve what you have to achieve and just take that one step at a time. So do well at school, do well at university, have a family. And it just felt like there was this timeline that was laid out in front of me that everybody followed almost without fail. And that's what I had to focus on. And all of these kind of inconvenient emotions and the sort of the random bits had to be suppressed because they seemed to get in the way. And I genuinely thought when I was younger that there was something wrong with me.
So was it a level of, because you said, you were random, there was a bit of chaos, you'd watch the grown-ups seeming to feel quite calm or reserved or knowing what was expected of them and you. So was there any explicit, you can't behave like that? Or was it just you picking up on, I've got to mirror the behaviour of others, or I think this is what's expected of me, I better squash that particular behaviour of mine?
It was there was an element of that. I mean, as I said at the beginning, I think a lot of it was just learned behaviour. You as a child, you watch, even if you don't realise it, you watch other people's body language, and it was always, if I think back, it was always quite guarded and always very careful. And to be honest, to some extent, for my parents anyway, they probably did have to be quite careful, especially living in Iraq. You had to really watch what you said. You couldn't even remotely talk about anything political or say anything out of turn, just in case, the wrong person was listening. So they were particularly guarded. And I picked up on that. But I think there was also an element, and this really extends to sort of way past childhood into teenage years and beyond even. There was this element of don't be too different, don't stand out too much.
Why? For what? For fear of judgment? Or?
Yeah, I think both of my parents, particularly my mother, often lived with this sort of notion that people were judging her or that people would judge her, partly, again, due to her childhood. And I think she never said directly, don't stand out because you're going to be judged. But she knew that I was different for all sorts of reasons. And neither of my parents, I think, really knew what to do with that and how to frame it in a positive way, and encouraged me to sort of make the most of it and to see it as a unique thing. So when I had problems at school, for example, when I was bullied a fair bit, the advice I was given was more along the lines of this is what to do to blend into the background, not stand out. And I think that's where it just so happens that my personality isn't really compatible with that.
Because it's not like you're an extrovert, it's just that the way you think is slightly different to just being conventional, do this and then that and then this. You like to explore things and be random, as you said.
This is the thing. I always had that element of curiosity, and I wanted to find out about everything. Everything interested me. It kind of still does. But I sort of found that I felt anyway that I was the only one who had that kind of energy, and everybody else stayed within their individual lanes and didn't really stray from them. And the other part of it is that I was very good at mimicking, I suppose. As soon as I realised, or it clicks in my head that was the best thing to do, I just started copying them. And it was only maybe in my early teens when it kind of gave me real problems, and I felt it was completely at odds with who I was, and I just had no idea what to do with it. Because I felt that I was stuck in this role of being quite passive, quite peripheral to not just conversations, but life in general. I let things sort of happen to me rather than having some agency over what I did with my life. And I played that role, I think, because I thought that's what I was here for. That it was up to me to kind of be on the edge of things, to read the room, to work out.
Be the odd one out and watch everyone else getting on?
Well, almost to be a sort of a facilitator in a weird way. Okay. So to be able to work out, okay, is this person okay? Is that person not? And I think I just became more the person who sensed how everyone else was feeling, but I never really worked out that balance between projecting my own thoughts, opinions, feelings, whatever, and the needs of other people. And it swayed far too much in the sort of the direction of what I thought other people needed.
And how and having that, so there were parts of your personality that you were holding back, and the parts that were coming out were either overdone because you thought that that's what was required, or you were meeting the needs of others through recognising what they needed on the given day.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel? Did it make you feel Or even on reflection, were you feeling? Did you feel more lonely or more empty, or did it just mean that as time progressed, you just felt even more out of sorts because you just weren't being yourself? How did this kind of come out?
I can remember feeling the main thing I remember feeling oddly is, it sounds random, I just remember feeling tired. I remember feeling exhausted because I devoted a hell of a lot of energy to maintaining it. And over time, who I was became more and more limited. So, a stupid example, but an age when I was at high school, when everyone's really bothered about how they look and how they appear to sort of other kids their age, that took a complete backseat. I completely ignored how I looked. I wasn't interested. It didn't even occur to me. If you look at the photos, they're all a bit of a horror show.
The glasses are amazing.
Yeah, and a moustache at the age of 13 and all that, and bowl haircut. But I gradually, sort of parts of me that should have been firing up, I suppose, were all kind of being switched off one by one. And I went from being a really sociable child in my, I suppose, just before I became a teenager, and then moving over to the UK, within the space of a couple of years, I became pretty much a recluse. I mean, I had friends at school, but it was a core group of 2 or 3. And even then, I didn't necessarily have that much in common with them. They were just people I felt comfortable with.
And even with them, are you still playing a role rather than being yourself?
Yeah, it was still more, as I say, the main thing for me was that I felt comfortable with them and they obviously liked me, but we tended to do things that they wanted when we spent time together, and I didn't.
Because you didn't care enough, or because you were too busy? Sorry, I've got lots of questions.
No, that's fine.
But because you wanted to be amenable, or because you didn't care enough?
Neither, really. It was more that, I mean, the habit thing, but also just I wanted to sort of make other people happy. I mean, that's a big element of my personality too. But I'd just forgotten that I had needs. It just didn't feature. It wasn't a thing, and it took me a long time to find that again.
Well, even now you're starting to say, "Oh, by the way, I really want this or don't like that," and I've not said it before because I've wanted to help out with this situation or that person, and so you're actually voicing what you need or what you feel like now.
Well, I think if you suppress parts of your who you really are, after a while you start kind of looking at them almost from a distance and kind of thinking, well, should I really be that? You kind of almost treat it with suspicion because it feels like it's a sort of an alien thing, an alien part of you, and that maybe it's best left in the back of your head. But really, it's only been in the last few years that I've realised how much that constant suppression has affected me. It's made me lonely. It's made me indecisive. It's stopped me from meeting as many people, going to as many social situations, because I can't abide the thought of going to these things and just not being myself. I hate it.
So it's actually got to the point now where you're so desperate not to not be yourself that you just remove yourself from a situation entirely.
That has happened. I think it's just more that I'm aware of it, and I'm still trying to find answers, find ways of changing that behaviour, because I've lost that muscle. I mean, I know I can talk to people, for example.
So the gut instinct, this is me muscle.
Yeah, well, no, that's there.
Okay.
But it's how do I go from, you could be talking, you could be saying something, and I could have a really strong opinion about it, or I could want to tell a stupid joke, or whatever it might be. I can feel it. It's in my gut. It's there. The words just don't come out.
Because you're too focused on me, or you're too focused on your role?
At this point, neither.
Okay.
It's just automatic.
Keep asking the wrong questions.
No. It's a good question.
Neither.
It's a good question. But it's more just there's a block. I mean, the other thing, even as I'm talking now, I'm quite aware of it, and I probably shouldn't be. But the other thing that happened is that even really odd things, like my voice became smaller and smaller. It would start clamping down. And as you've found before, sometimes I can talk too quietly because I suppose that's a side effect of suppressing who you are, is that you feel in very sort of physical terms that you have to be smaller and you have to make yourself more inconspicuous, and that goes along with it. And I find, as daft as it might sound, I find it really difficult and tiring to talk. It's just not. It just becomes this sort of arduous thing. But inside, I've got all these things to say. I've got all these things I'd like to do, but it's just
you've held back for so long. It's really
I don't know how to do
difficult
it.
for you to do it.
Yeah.
Wow. Because you've your blog, Mixed Dressings, you wrote a blog post a while ago where you were talking about a family engagement. Your family, obviously everyone is our family, but your particular family engagement, where there were people that you had grown up with and obviously cousins, and it was literally just family. People who you know love you, who you know don't judge you.
Yeah.
But you'd spent the whole engagement with a running commentary in your mind, pulling yourself apart, not just because you're that type of person, because you're not. You don't actually pull yourself apart that often, but you were pulling yourself apart because you were recognising holding back, because you were saying things that weren't you, or you just weren't saying something and you were saying, why are you not speaking up? Why are you not engaging in this conversation? That type of thing. So obviously, it's a really interesting article if anybody else suffers from kind of holding back. So do go and have a look at the Mixed Dressings blog. But you did say about how it holds you back when you're on your own, and that sometimes that just means you become a bit indecisive.
Yeah.
But how do you have the running commentary in your mind? Because obviously you're not bouncing off someone else and realising you're not saying, or you're saying the wrong thing. But when you're on your own, how does that come out? Because I, as someone who I know what it feels like to hold back, as self-protection, like I said earlier, and there are times I will stop myself from doing something I really want to because I overthink the end result, or I'll be judged, or I haven't got the time, or whatever the innocuous reason is. What do you do when you mean that you're holding back when you're on your own? What is it? How does that play out?
Well, I think mostly just it's a lack of confidence, I guess. So I'm trying to think of an example. I may, if I happen to have a day when I've got some time to myself and I particularly want to do something, so I might want to, I've only just started picking up playing the guitar again, for example. But there've been times when, even when I was in the swing of playing it, that I'd think, I'd really like to play the guitar. I'd like to learn a new song or something. And I would have a crisis of confidence, and I'd think, but is that really you? Are you supposed to be doing this kind of thing? Because that's a bit.
It's not whether you could play the guitar or not. It's whether you, as a person, are supposed to play the guitar.
Does this fit the role?
Wow.
And because my role, as much as I fucking hate it, has become to be sensible, to be quite sort of square, if you like, to do logical. The right things, logical, everything that's kind of anathema to my real personality. So
you're very good at it all, though.
what the logical bits?
If I need a maths equation or something worked out in terms of a process, I know where to come.
But this is the other part, and unfortunately, this is the other thing. I am somebody who's quite malleable. I can do those things. I mean, when I was at school, I did really well at school. It just so happened to be something that I could do, and I carried on doing it. I mean,
you weren't happy doing it.
No, as you know,
you could, but you wish you hadn't.
Yeah, I did it because and I've got inverted commas going up now. It made sense because everybody in my family was quite sort of scientific or became doctors or engineers. So I chose subjects at school and then university that that fitted the mold. And all along, I knew that it just wasn't me. But I genuinely thought that was my only choice. And so the other things I'd like to have done, I mean, I can't say now what I really should have done at university. I mean, who knows? It was, I don't know. But I'm more really the kind of person who likes creative things, languages. It actually, oddly enough, a lot of my personality is about communicating. And the things I chose and the life choices I made were the opposite, because I just thought, but communicating is, nobody does it, and it's a bad thing, and you'll stand out, and just overload. So yeah, as you were talking about this event, I mean, it was my dad's 80th birthday last year. I think that's the first time I properly honed in on kind of how much of that sort of commentary went on in my head, and quite what I said to myself, and how stupid I felt talking to these people who, as you say, a lot of them, well, all of them were family, and talking to them as if I was, I don't know, still playing this role and holding back. And even, you know, I'm somebody who's very tactile and huggy and kissy and all that. I don't do that with a lot of them, because I think that's not what they'd expect me to do.
And I don't think that they would automatically come up and give you a hug, because they'd assume that you might not feel comfortable with it because of the way your body language, not that you look awkward, but that you seem quite self-contained and quite calm and stoic to a certain degree. I can't think of other words to explain it. But yeah, I mean, especially... you hear of this in terms of double lives, where people will say, at home, I can be this person, but I can't be this person outside of the home. So it does happen where people can probably, you know, relate to that. Obviously, you know, put in the comments if you're listening to this and you relate to it, and how that works out for you. But I want to go back to that whole, but even when you're on your own, you hold back.
Yeah.
So... I mean, I don't believe you hold back from being demonstrative with me and the girls physically, but there will be times that you might overthink. Oh, I think you've said before, Beck's in a bit of a mood, or Beck's looking a bit tired. I fancy a hug. I'll leave her alone because she looks a bit tired and a bit self-contained. So you do actually stop yourself on occasion because you're overthinking in a nice way. Yeah. Actually what will suit her at this point in time rather than what will suit yourself. Does that come under the holding back thing or not?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'd say that of everybody, I think with our children, I don't hold back. I genuinely don't. I mean, I can't say that 100% of the time I'm myself, because I don't think that's possible probably with anyone. No. But I am able to do that with them. And for the most part with you. But there are times, I think at some point in my life became very good at reading other people's moods and feelings, and that thing, which I think I may have even said in one of my blog entries. I can walk into a room and tell pretty much exactly how everyone's feeling.
I think we 100% have to explore this whole side of the empath thing and emotional intelligence in a future episode. Yeah. Definitely.
But I think that because particularly my parents, there were lots of things that were left unsaid, and I could tell the feelings were just kind of suspended and just hanging there. I felt, not that it was a conscious thing, I started kind of almost holding other people's feelings, that became part of my role. So I need to be on the edge of things. I need to be that peripheral figure so that I can hold the emotions that are going on around me, at least the emotions that aren't being expressed. So you hold
back by holding on to their emotions and helping them move forward?
Sort of. So if to go back to your example, if you seem to be in a bit of a mood, it would be automatic pilot. It would be more important for me to bear in mind your mood and push back my need. And I can fool myself into thinking that's the right thing to do.
Well, I appreciate it.
Well, of course, yeah. I'll just carry on. That's fine.
Thanks.
But really, that's not the way forward for me. And
well, no, and it's not you're not going to be you and your better self in the future if you can continue to hold back and focus on others, or stop yourself from being you. But as you've said, how do you do that? How does one move forward from holding back, not exploring the personality traits that are sincerely them, but they don't feel like they can show them, and embrace who they are? Yeah. Especially if it's not been anything directly that it's not like somebody was telling you forever, don't show your flamboyant side, for example, and then they slip off the dish and you're like, cool, they've gone now, I can start being flamboyant. It's not that cut and dry. It's not like you ever had a direct rule applied.
Not, but at the same time, the only things that were praised were when I did well academically, for examul.
Yeah, so as a kid, obviously, you then pursue that path.
It's more sort of by a process of elimination. You know that if you're, to use your word, flamboyant, I don't think I'm particularly flamboyant.
No, I was just trying to think of something else.
Having that kind of slightly random, nonsensical energy, even as a kid, it was picked up on. Or
made fun of with the whole
or frowned upon
absent-minded professor thing.
Yeah, and it just all became really awkward. Like I'd do something silly or something frivolous or whatever, like a child does, like our children do all the time, and I'd just get either tumbleweed or the response would be kind of well-meaning, but basically somebody trying to say, "Oh yeah, okay, fine, I don't know what to do with that," and so. Yeah, I just stuck to the more sort of unemotional stuff, the sensible stuff, and lived with the consequences. And the consequences are pretty sort of far-reaching.
So what's your plan then? I mean, you say you don't know what to do, but we all have to start somewhere when you're trying to... Okay, you recognise that holding back is one of the behaviours that come from not feeling like you belong.
Yep.
Mainly, I'd say more that than not feeling safe, or both? Do you think they both drive it?
I suppose it's mostly not belonging. Maybe you're more likely to be yourself if you feel safe. And I don't often feel particularly that the environment that I'm in is safe enough to be a platform for me to just let loose. I mean, I think I don't really know how to move forward to some extent, but I think maybe since the start of this year, I've been focusing a bit more on things that ways I can communicate parts of my personality. I mean, I really should get back to that blog. I mean, God knows the last time I had an entry was probably nearly a year ago now. Things like that where I'm actually able to, whether it's writing things down or when I talk to the people who I feel particularly comfortable with, just making sure that I express feelings and not just facts.
Exercising you and what you need and want.
And, you know, even things like going back to playing music again. I mean, it's just having that more sort of expressive side and getting used to that being a part of my life.
So have you mapped out the things that you feel are core personality traits and behaviours that you don't exercise, and therefore there's a kind of... Is it that process-led where you're saying,
no.
Right, I am creative as a person, but I haven't really explored that, therefore I'm going to go and do this. Is it that, or have you done it in a more subtle way?
No, I think that really... if I were to properly put into words what I think my personality is, it's really difficult. It's much more, I think, almost. It sounds like a cop-out, but anything goes. Like I am
just in the moment. The point is you could be anything in the moment, but the problem is you're not allowing yourself to just be.
It's impeded,
right?
Like I can be someone who's quite logical, and as you say, I become your human calculator when you need me to be.
Mr. Google.
I can do that, and that's fine. But the next minute, I might want to be dancing around the room or whatever it might be.
But we also, the people on the outside, everyone likes a box. I mean, this is one of the problems for anyone who has been a particular type or moulded themselves whilst growing up. Friends and family put us in a box. We all like, as human beings, I think, to compartmentalise. This person does this person does that, this is what I can expect. And the minute we start breaking out of that box or showing we're more than that box or just completely different, the rest of us start saying... oh, hang on a second, that doesn't fit, that doesn't chime, you're not being yourself. And it's like, actually, I am now. No, you're not. I know who you are. And so that can also cause a constraint, can't it?
It can, and I think there's probably an element, and I doubt I'm alone here, where I suppose I subconsciously think if I were to be completely myself now, with all the people who've known me the whole of my life, that they might react poorly to it, or they might go, what the fuck's he doing? This isn't him. This isn't what I expect.
So you're anticipating that, assuming that, rather than... Okay.
which is a fair response.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's really the reason why I kind of keep holding back, but I think it is in my head. It would probably do me good sometimes do you know, the main thing for me sometimes is not hesitating. So if I'm having a conversation with someone and something comes up in my head, to just blurt it out. I mean, preferably not interrupt someone, but as soon as I can, say it and then bear the consequences.
Yeah. Because
I tend to think about it too much. And by the time you've thought about it, it won't sound natural anyway.
I can't even say flippantly, just trust yourself. Because actually, if we don't, it's more about practice.
Yeah.
And giving yourself the opportunity to practice actually saying it, because you might sound like an arse, or it might come out wrong, and so you can't just trust yourself that you'll say the right thing, because I think that's too easy to say. Just trust yourself, but it's being prepared to say, I might say the wrong thing, but unless I practice, I'm not going to ever get to the point where I'm able to just be myself.
And it's also not just, I don't want to limit it to me in social situations, because it's far more far wider than that. I think it's also learning that if you, this is a big thing for me, if you make a mistake or if you do something that doesn't work out, you can recover. You know, it's okay. You can just say, well, that didn't work, I'll try something else. I think that going forward is a big focus for me.
It's okay to fuck up.
Yeah, it's okay to fuck up, and it's not going to be the end of the world. You can move forward and learn from it, and the world's still going to carry on spinning.
Well, I think this is... I would say that's... Yeah. Sorry, I'm just looking at Maz going, I think that's it. I think we've covered all the bits that actually it sounds to me that's quite comprehensive. So... please share with us. You know, has this resonated? Do you feel yourself holding back? Have you been in a position where Maz is now before, and you've actually managed to work your way through, and kind of share that knowledge? Because I'm sure, Maz, you'd say you'd be open to learning from other people who have been through it and managed to somehow get that golden thing of, I no longer hold back, or I manage that situation better now.
Or even people who are even sort of further back, if you like, on the journey, and are just starting to realise that's what they've been doing for most of their lives. And, you know, it would be really interesting to start that discussion.
Yeah. So please, we welcome that.
Yes.
And yes, seeing as you're still here with us and you're still listening, we have a big fat thank you for you for sticking with us to the end of the episode.
Yeah.
And listen out for the next one, where we'll be going through other behaviours that both Maz and I have based on our root convictions, and hopefully something will come back and hit you between the eyes and you say, ta-da, that's me, or that's someone else I love. Let's listen in and hopefully learn from it. Or, as I said, share so that the rest of us can learn from you. For now, though, take care. Look after yourself.
Bye, everybody.